Well, my chemotherapy and radiation has been an incredible experience for me.
We are so happy to hear that.
It has been. I was thrilled to hear that you felt as though I had optimized the experience. And,
Absolutely.
I'm wondering, though, I'm sure you know my wants and desires far greater than I do. I am so anxious for mediumship skills, connecting with spirit in that way, and I'm wondering if there's something that I need to be doing, or that...
You simply must learn to trust your first feeling. You, much like Bryan did in the beginning, changed what came into your head to make sense to you. Do not worry if it makes sense to you. A good example is the example of when Bryan was out with friends, and he was receiving images of a horse driving a car.
Right.
He tried several times to change it into a car with a horse trailer, or a horse pulling a car, anything that made sense to him. The reality was, when he approached the woman that the image was for, her father, who had died in his office, had a picture, a painting, behind his desk of a horse actually driving a car. So you see, it was an excellent learning example for him to understand that go with the first thing that comes in until you have established a clear and very conscious connection with your guide. And that is how we communicate with you. We nudge, we inspire whenever we can. We try and give you direction, but we cannot force you, nor would we want to. We enjoy watching the contrast in which you create. So you will find that many times we speak of how boring Bryan's life was prior to his awakening, that he tried to be good all the time. And that is very boring for us. The contrast is why you come into the physical. It was created long ago by those in power to create them as sins, as bad things, as negative experiences. But the reality is that you come to this physical existence in order to experience the things that you cannot experience in non-physical. The reputation of your planet throughout the universe, it is the toughest school that there is within the universe. The density of this physical existence is overwhelming. So you are very admired that you want to come forward into this, and yet there are those in non-physical who think you are crazy too. There are much easier experiences to have in the physical in other places within the universe, but you have chosen to come here. So we enjoy watching the contrast and those moments in your life when it's, as you often say, those aha moments of realizing the contrast you've created and where the contrast started with the decision that you made. That is what you come here to do. That is what you come to learn. It would be very boring if you did everything as you do in non-physical. What would be the point in coming into the physical? Does this make sense?
It does. I guess with connecting with spirit in the mediumship type way, you know, when you speak of Bryan, you speak of his imagery, the horse and the car and stuff as example. At this point, I'm feeling more like it's thought, more like it's information that I get.
It's typical for most to feel that way.
And so it's hard to tell if you're changing something that you're not actually seeing.
Well, let me put it this way. Let me say that I push the thought into your head of, I want chocolate ice cream. But you look at it and say, I want chocolate chip ice cream. Simply changing that thought has now changed what was coming into your head. Does this make sense? So when that person comes up, when that thought comes into your head and you are standing with someone who is their non-physical family or loved ones or guide is trying to speak through you to them, and the thought comes in that I love chocolate ice cream, and you change it because you don't love chocolate ice cream to I love chocolate chip ice cream, they're not going to understand what you are saying. Does this make sense so far?
It does.
So, though you may not think that you are changing a thought as it enters your head, more than likely you are. If you just spit out what is what comes into your head, which we realize can be very awkward. But if you just spit it out, you will find those moments when the person in which you are speaking suddenly says, "Oh my God, that's exactly what my mother would say," or how she would say it. You've ran across that recently during your radiation treatments and visiting with those in the hospital. You had ran across that it did not make sense to you, the comment that was coming into your head, but once you said it, you realized that that's because that's the way their mother or father or grandfather would have said it. Does this make sense?
It does. I notice it a lot when I'm writing with Harry.
Yes.
Those types of things.
That is also an excellent way in which to begin to communicate with your spirit guide. This conversation that we are currently having, will this be that others can see it?
Yes, most probably.
Okay, so that is an excellent way to begin the process of working with your guide. They call it automatic writing. And sit down with a blank piece of paper at a time that you are feeling that you want to connect and that you have that privacy, that silence, that time alone. And begin to write. Begin to write your feelings. You will suddenly find that a paragraph has gone by and you have no idea what you have just written until you read it back and realize, I would not say that way. That was a key factor for Bryan to make his connection with me. Was he was beginning to realize that when he was asking questions, the answers he was getting was being put into verbiage he would never use. He questioned himself often about it until he realized that it was me speaking. Now he tells me to shut up all the time. But our relationship is very strong, and our communication is very strong. We always want to tell everyone that we meet, you are all capable of the same connection. We do realize that there is a uniqueness when it comes to Bryan and his ability to channel. Because of his visual system, that does not mean that you cannot do it yourself. We want to make that very clear. Bryan is more on an accelerated path because of his desire. His ascension has been, shall we say, painful.
Right.
He has had many days that have been very hard on him physically. Some will experience that, some will not. It definitely comes from your beliefs and what you think has to happen in order for you to ascend. You will often hear stories of ascension being painful. That is up to you, if it will be painful or not. That is another thing that is very difficult for you in the physical to believe and accept, but it is true.
Can you give me any ideas of how I specifically can continue my relationship with Harry growing and keep becoming more clear? I have some moments of such clarity and then others that...
If you pay attention to those moments, you will find that it's moments that you are not trying, that you are making no effort. It is important that you not try too hard. That is what we run into constantly in the physical, with all of you. The harder you try, the more distance you put between you, your connection, and yourself. That sounds backwards to what you are taught. You are raised in a world where you must work hard, try hard in order to achieve anything. That is not so with your spiritual connection. When you relax and you do not try is when you get the most clarity. Does this make sense so far?
It does.
Okay, so the more you just let it be what it is going to be, you cannot rush anything in your spiritual journey. We will tell you that now. The more you try to rush it, the further back it's pushed. It happens at a natural time because everything has timing. Everything comes in at the perfect time. You'll often hear us say it is perfect. You'll hear us say it is perfect when your mother has just passed away. We understand that you think we are crazy because of this, but the reality is that as you grow in your spiritual journey, you will find that all is perfect. That by allowing it to be and not trying to force and fill in your grid, you are following your optimum path. It is when you try and force it and fill it that you are getting off track and you're more taking the hard road, or the school of hard knocks, as Bryan says. It is much easier to simply flow like the river flows by your home. Very simply, very easily. It does not try. The sun does not try to come up. It just simply does. Does this make sense to you?
It does. When I was at the hospital the other day and doing my little mock reading in my mind, like you know I do, you'd said I'd nailed it with the one person, Anne, I believe was her name. I had the feeling of her being a teacher. You said a professor. I did speak to those people the next day, and they had no idea.
Often they don't. We have ran into many times into those in the physical that in the moment as you are speaking with them, their mind is racing with a million questions. Often you have sat down with questions for me, and as we sit down, they're all gone.
Yes.
It tends to happen, and it tends to be that in most cases, it is after they go home, they relax, they think about what they have heard, that it dawns on them, oh, my great aunt was Anne. It tends to always come up that way, unless they are very connected to their family and know every member of their family. Often, in a case right now with your doctor, Bryan had spoke to her great-grandmother, who had informed us that she was busy. Yep. Bryan is yelling at me right now. Yeah. That's private right now. So, at any point, she was very shocked when she heard, but she still has not figured out who this grandmother, this great-grandmother is. She will. They will find it in their family tree. Do not get discouraged by that. There are often times that you can get the name wrong, but you are not getting the vibration wrong. There are times that Bryan is just learning this, that the non-physical talking to you is actually their guide and not a family member that has passed on. And that can get very confusing for you in the physical. You must become allowing. You know, we have talked often about resistance and the ability to allow two very difficult things for you in the physical to do. For whatever reason, you feel that if you allow, that you are giving up power, that you are releasing power to something unknown to you. And in working with your resistance, many of you often jump in defense that you do not have that resistance. Yeah. We find that humorous. We do not understand why you get so defensive about it, but that is okay, you will work through it. They are two very difficult things, but they are the biggest priorities in your spiritual journey in order to connect with those that have passed on and to connect with your guide. Please keep in mind that when I say guide, it does not mean that you only have one guide. Many of you have several, some of you have one. It really depends on what you had decided before you came here and where you are at in your spiritual journey. You must understand, if you are paying no attention to your spiritual life whatsoever, if you are wrapped up in the physical of this world and what goes on around you, it is quite often that you will have one guide that's around when you think of something you need. But they do not hang out with you constantly simply because you're not paying attention to them. They are with you all the time. Do not get me wrong. They are in a, as Bryan says, an earshot. But as you grow that, you will find to the point where Bryan is, where we become annoying almost to him. Please leave me alone, he says once in a while. So, but always remember, and we cannot stress this enough, all of you are connected. It is simply that you have either muted it or shut it off for now. Be very careful what you wish for in this journey, because we enjoy helping you get to those goals, but sometimes it can be a little shocking. Bryan has had the experience of waking up in the morning with some non-physical person he does not know sitting at the end of his bed, yes, wanting to get a message across. That can come across as a little creepy sometimes for him. So keep in mind that everything will happen at the right time, so that you are not overwhelmed, so that it does not scare you back into the rabbit hole. Does this make sense?
It does, and actually brings me to my curiosity about the E.T. connection that I felt, and the experience I had the one day in the bathroom, which you know of which one I speak. Can you give me any insight on that at all?
We can tell you this, and we will say this to all of you out there that are listening. There is an E.T. connection, as you call it, with each of you. This is not the only place that you have incarnated in the physical.